It's July 6th, 2025, and Tropical Storm Chantal, now Tropical Depression Chantal, made landfall around Litchfield Beach, South Carolina at 4 a.m. with maximum winds of 50 miles an hour. Earlier this morning, it actually peaked at a 58-mile-an-hour tropical storm, which actually pretty much exceeded all expectations it had, and now it has moved through northeastern South Carolina into North Carolina, and it will trace the I-95 corridor into Raleigh. This is it in its current state, in this big blob we see here with some still pretty interesting convection going on. Will hold the highest winds, although they are only going to be a sustained 30 miles an hour now at this point, and the largest amounts of rain. But in the outer bands along coastal North Carolina is another hot spot where we could see quite a bit of rain and other strong winds, with gusts of up to 35 miles an hour. Tropical Depression Chantal will likely move through North Carolina through the I-95 corridor across Raleigh. Then by 8 a.m. on Monday, it will be in southeastern Virginia before it pushes out into the Atlantic on Tuesday and traces the coast all the way up to New England and Cape Cod, and then it will make its way out to sea. Now, unfortunately, we see pretty small increments of movement within large periods of time, which is one of the reasons why the flash flooding risk in this corridor will be enhanced. The spaghetti models have also pretty much agreed on a track through the I-95 corridor, then through southeastern Virginia, then tracing up the eastern coast of the US all the way to New England and Cape Cod before it pushes its way out into the Atlantic as post-tropical Chantal. Here is a map of all the power outages in South Carolina from the storm, and we can see that in a large part of the areas affected by Tropical Storm Chantal, there have actually been almost zero power outages, with only a very isolated area up here in northern South Carolina. And in the state, they have only had around 2,600 outages, which is quite good because a lot of people still have power in the parts that were hit by the highest winds. And then fortunately, the same can be said about North Carolina, with only 1,500 customers out of power, which is expected to rise a little, especially in our areas, which we'll see a lot of rain and some flash flooding up the I-95 corridor. But this is a quite good number, and it's definitely a good thing that we haven't seen that many power outages with this storm. Tropical storm winds only extended into the very northeastern and southeastern corner of South Carolina and North Carolina, and now it's just going to be tropical depression force winds around 30 miles an hour as it traverses the eastern seaboard. And luckily, this will not really be enough to cause any damage. Another associated risk with tropical depression Chantal will be life-threatening drip currents off the coast all the way through northeastern South Carolina into southeastern Virginia. So definitely anybody planning to go in the ocean should exercise extreme caution in this area. And the last thing we're going to talk about before we talk about the main threat being the flooding will be a 2% conditional tornado risk for much of eastern North Carolina, which will be associated with the possibility of some weak spin-up tornadoes along the northeastern flank of Tropical Depression Chantal. And there actually have already been a couple of tornado warnings out here today, so definitely something to be aware of. Now, the largest threat associated with this storm is going to be the risk of flash flooding. We can see that we have a widespread area which will see probably 2 to 4 inches of rain in the green. Then in the yellow, we have a corridor with an increased threat which could see up to 6 inches, but newer model runs are actually predicting quite a bit higher than that. And this yellow portion will run through the I-95 corridor, Raleigh, North Carolina. And then if you drew a straight line up through North Carolina, about 40 miles east of Charlotte, that would be the greatest area with a chance of flooding today. And already, Tropical Storm Chantal, now Tropical Depression Chantal, has dumped loads of rain across the northeastern corner of South Carolina and a lot of the North Carolina coast, ranging anywhere from 2 to 4 inches. But like earlier, I mentioned that Tropical Storm Chantal was moving pretty slowly at the moment at only 8 to 10 miles an hour northward. Now, it is expected to speed up a little as it gets closer to the eastern seaboard, but in its current state, it will be slow, which will greatly increase the amount of rain it can dump on an area. So right here, we're actually seeing a pretty dangerous corridor of some high rain accumulation amounts right here along the I-95 corridor up into Raleigh, where isolated areas of up to 5 to 9 inches of rain are possible, which would create a pretty large flash flooding risk, as all of this rain is going to be dumped in a pretty short period of time. So the I-95 corridor up into Raleigh is where I think the most dangerous threat of flash flooding will take place today. So although Tropical Storm Chantal has now degraded into Tropical Depression Chantal, it will still bring some pretty formidable risk which need to be taken pretty seriously.